Imagine two people, same city, same year, same starting salary. One of them used that salary to buy a small apartment. The other one saved diligently, got annual raises, never wasted money, and felt pretty good about his financial discipline. 20 years later, the person who bought the apartment is sitting on an asset worth 4 times what they paid. The person who saved is still working, still getting raises, still feeling like he's almost there. Same city, same starting point, 20 years. 2 completely different financial realities. This is not a story about luck. This is not a story about hard work. This is a story about how the system is structurally wired to make sure your salary, no matter how fast it grows, almost never keeps up with the price of the assets you're trying to buy. And most people never figure this out until it's too late.
Here is a number that should bother you. In the United States, between 1970 and 2023, median household income grew by roughly 400% in nominal terms. Sounds impressive, but home prices over the same period grew by over 2,000%. In India, between 2001 and 2024, average urban salaries roughly tripled. Mumbai residential property prices in the same period went up by nearly 700% in many localities. This isn't a local anomaly. This is a global pattern. London, Singapore, Sydney, Toronto. The story is nearly identical everywhere. And here's the thing. Economists know this. Central banks know this. Governments know this. And yet the gap keeps widening. So the real question isn't whether this is happening. The real question is, why? What is the actual mechanism that keeps salaries perpetually behind? Because if you don't understand the engine, you'll keep running on a treadmill and calling it progress. Let's start with how salaries are set. Your employer pays you based on what you produce, or more precisely, what the market says your labor is worth. That number is anchored to productivity growth, inflation targets, and competitive benchmarks. In most developed economies, wage growth has historically tracked inflation at roughly 2 to 3% per year. Good years, maybe 4 or 5%. Exceptional years, like post-pandemic 2022, briefly touched higher, but the long-run average, around 3% annually. Now let's look at how asset prices are set. Assets, real estate, stocks, gold, are not priced on what you earned. They're priced on what money is available to chase them, and that is a fundamentally different equation. When central banks cut interest rates, borrowing becomes cheap. When borrowing is cheap, investors borrow more. When more money chases the same number of houses, the price of houses goes up. Your salary didn't change. The asset price did. This is the core asymmetry. Salaries are linked to labor markets. Asset prices are linked to capital markets. And capital markets respond to monetary policy in a way that labor markets simply do not and cannot. Your boss does not give you a raise because the Federal Reserve cut rates. But a real estate investor absolutely does buy more property when rates fall, and that pushes prices up. That's mechanism number 1.
Now here is where the math gets uncomfortable. Even if your salary grows at 5% per year, which is above average, and asset prices grow at 8% per year, which is roughly what equities and prime real estate have delivered over long periods, you are falling behind every single year by 3 percentage points. But it gets worse because of compounding. At 5% annual growth, your salary doubles in roughly 14 years. At 8% annual growth, asset prices double in 9 years. So in the time it takes your salary to double once, the asset has already doubled and started growing towards its next double. This means the gap isn't linear, it's exponential. The further time goes, the wider it gets. And you cannot outrun an exponential gap with a linear income. There's something else. Assets that are already expensive generate more return in absolute terms. A house worth 1 crore that appreciates 8% gains 8 lakhs in 1 year. A salary of 8 lakhs growing at 8% gains 64,000 rupees. The asset owner made more in a year than the salary owner's entire annual growth, just from appreciation. Wealth generates wealth faster than work generates wealth. That is not a motivational statement. That is arithmetic.
Now, You've probably heard the counter-narrative. Just invest early. Buy index funds. Real estate is always a good investment. These things are said with such confidence, usually by people who already own assets. And yes, investing works. Compounding works. But here's what that conversation carefully avoids. To buy your first asset, you need capital. And capital comes from savings. And savings come from the gap between income and expenses. But in high asset price environments, that gap is being compressed. Rents are rising faster than salaries. Education costs are rising. Healthcare costs are rising. The monthly surplus that you'd need to accumulate your first down payment, that surplus is shrinking, not growing, for a significant portion of the population. This is the entry barrier problem. The investment advice assumes you've already cleared the first hurdle, but the first hurdle keeps getting higher. And so the people who got in early, who bought the house, who bought the stocks, who had capital to deploy, they accumulate more capital. And the people who didn't, who are relying purely on salary income, they run faster on the treadmill while the destination moves further away.
Here is what this actually means at scale. When asset prices decouple from wage growth, you get a structural transfer of wealth, not through taxation, not through theft, but through the quiet arithmetic of compounding. People who own assets get richer in real terms. People who don't stagnate, even if their nominal salary is rising. And this has consequences far beyond personal finance. It changes where people can afford to live. It changes whether people have children. It changes political anger. The populism you see across the world, the resentment toward elites, the distrust of institutions, the feeling that the system is rigged, a significant part of that is people intuitively sensing this math, even if they can't articulate it. They don't need an economics degree to notice that their parents bought a house on one income in 5 years, and they can't do it on 2 incomes in 15. The math is visible in lived experience. And when large numbers of people feel permanently left behind by a system they played by the rules of,
So what do you do with this information? The standard answer is invest early, buy assets, don't just save, grow. And that's not wrong, but it's also not available to everyone at the same time. Because if everyone buys assets simultaneously, prices rise further, and the next generation faces an even higher barrier. Which raises a question that nobody in the financial advice industry really wants to sit with. If the entire premise of wealth building in the modern economy is own assets, and asset prices keep rising faster than salaries, and the entry barrier keeps compounding, then at some point, the game mathematically excludes the next generation. Not because they were lazy, not because they made bad choices, but because the structure of the system ensures that $1 of capital always outruns $1 of labor. We keep telling people to work smarter, but we don't ask whether a system where working harder is structurally designed to fall behind is a system worth examining more carefully. Think about that.